Hi guys, back again with part 3 of chapter 1, Tsotsi by Athol Fugard. His name was Gumboot Dwahalmini, and he had been chosen, but he never knew until it was too late. They gave him no warning. Gumboot was a man. Measured in hope, he stood in his shoes, tall amongst men. But even barefoot, on a day back with an empty belly, and a chesty laugh sounding the vastness of his humour as he walked into the city so that those who heard him looked up and laughed at him, even then Gumboot had stood as high as a head in heaven. Maxaloo, he had said 1,000 miles away, standing on the side of the road with his wife, Maxaloo, I will be back. The white man had pointed along the road to Sabata's place as the way to the Golden City, so he started walking that way. His wife stood and watched him for a long time, and later, when she had got tired, because she was heavy with child, she sat down on the grass, and he saw her like that until the road took him over the hill, and he remembered her like that ever since. He had also asked the white man how many days it would take, and the white man had said he had reached the city travelling in 2 days on his motor car, which of course was faster than walking. Anyway, he started counting, and when he reached 10 and could count no further, he made a notch in his stick. Thereafter he made a notch in his stick every time he had counted another 10. There were quite a few notches in his stick when he broke it, killing the snake, and had to throw it away. So he had stopped counting. The weather had been warm when he left his wife on the side of the road, and his belly full, but with the time the nights grew colder, his one blanket thinner, and there were days of hunger. He worked once, and with the money he earned bought himself a pair of shoes, which he carried wrapped up in his blanket. He lived through days of vast silence, tramping along the road with unending veldt stretching away unseen on every side, tramping through the clouds of dust left by the hurrying cars, always silent, very alone, but never without hope. Then, on a big day of the new world he was in, the brown, flat, unbroken world he had walked into, on a certain big day, topping a rise, he saw the buildings of the Golden City in a purple distance. And they were big, and that day Gumboot found his voice, and laughed, and hoped high again, and put on his shoes for the last day of his long walk. In the city he found work on the mines, and a room in one of the townships, and for a year he had been travelling from the one to the other in the early morning, with a multitude of others on the crowded trains, to work, and back in the evening, with the same multitude on the same trains, to sleep. He travelled safe for a year because he heeded the advice of others, and in that same year he worked hard and earned well and wore through new shoes he had bought on the road, and had them mended, then wore through them again, and then through them again, and brought a new pair. In some ways the year was a short one, and in others it was long, especially when he remembered Maxaloo sitting on the side of the road, and he got him a man who could make words to do him a letter back home. And now, at last, the year was almost over. In a week, only one more week of early steaming, mornings, and hard work under the ground, he would be going back with the money he had saved. Maxaloo would be getting back her man, very much the same as he had left, with his laugh still big, and his hands that were generous and in the gestures of love, and even in shoes, still as high as hope. But Gumboot was a man, and that was a second meaning. It has to do with death and the frailty of even those earthen cups that hold passionate draughts of laughter that can be broken, and all the life of man spilt in the dust. Gumboot was this man also, in this meaning, because on that Friday night train, going back to the township a week before going home, Butcher was behind him, and Butcher knew with unfailing accuracy the position of the heart. Gumboot had made 3 mistakes. Firstly, he smiled. It was because of the long queue at the station entrance, you see, because it was only a week to going home, and ahead of him was a weekend of no work, and a man coming around to his room to write Maksulu the letter that he was coming back. It was because of the people, his people. There were so many of his people. The smell of these other men, their impatience to be home, some sad, most happy. It was because all of this that he smiled. And Tsotsi noticed him, because that smile was as white as light. His second mistake was the tie. Flaming red it was, with bolts of silver lightning playing on his chest, like those sunset storms he had seen as a boy, when he had stopped on the long track home with the cattle after a day in the mountain pastures, stopping under the torn and brooding sky to shout his exultation to the world, and hear it echoing down the long valleys, and then to run with fear when the sky answered and lightning struck deep in the mountains. He had brought the tie at lunchtime from the Indian hawker who trundled past his cart scarves and beads and bangles and bright things to the mine gate every Friday, bought simply because he had never had one, and it would surely impress Maksulu. But it was a bright tie, and made it easy for Tsotsi to follow him at a distance as the queue shuffled on its 1,000 legs, like a millipede, to the ticket office. And there, the third mistake, he brought the ticket with money from his pay pocket. And in the moment, and in its exuberance, he had forgotten a cardinal piece of advice for getting home safe on the Friday night train. Don't let anyone see your money. Why, after all, remember the silly warning when the thousands of his own people stood around him, who, like him, were honest men and about their own business of getting home safely and quickly. 1 whole year, and never any trouble on the 4:49, always 10 minutes late. And so he forgot to slip a small coin apart when they had paid him, and instead now tore his pay packet open in a hurry, because the others behind him were in a hurry, because of their laughter and curses, tearing the pay packet open to find a small coin among the notes. He hurried to the platform and waited there. See, he was still alive, but Tsotsi was closing in on his man, and when the train, the 5:49, always 10 minutes late, pulled into the station and the crowd surged for the doors, he used that moment to close in on his man. And now in the train, still alive, jammed with as many as the coach could hold, going home in a smell of hard work and tobacco smoke, his ears as full as his nose with the low murmur of tired voices, himself impatient because the writing man was coming to his room at 6:30, and there was still half an hour walk from the station, and in between all this thinking of Maksulu, then his tie, and seeing it crumpled by the rash to get in, wanting to straighten it, but finding with slow surprise that he could not move either arm. He never had time to register the full meaning of that moment. He tried a second time, but the arp was strong. Tsotsi smiled at the growing bewilderment on the big boss's face, waiting for and catching the explosion of darkness in the eyes as butcher worked just spoke up and into his heart. Even as that was happening, Tsotsi bent close to the dying man and in his ear whispered an obscene reference to his mother. A moment of hate at the last, he had learned, disfigured the face in death. The Arp still had his arms locked around the man's waist. As the body slumped, the other three crowded in and with the combined pressure of their bodies held it erect. A move unnoticed in the crowd coach. Boston, who was the nearest, and who was also sick right through his brain, through his heart, into his stomach, and was fighting to keep it down. Boston, it was who slipped his hand into the pocket and took out the pay packet. When the train pulled into the station, the crowd made a second surge for the door, as happened every night, and the few on the station who wanted to go further up the line battled their way against this flood to get into the coaches, as also happened every night. But the 5:49, 10 minutes late, did not pull away, as happened occasionally on Friday nights, because those left behind in the coach and the few who got in found gumboot to Helmini and saw the end of the bicycle spoke.